Hello, everyone. Bienvenidos. I want to let you know, first of all, that we have Spanish interpretation available for this call. Tenemos interpretación disponible para esta plática. Para activar la interpretación, por favor, hagan clic en el globito o los 3 puntos que van a ver en su Zoom. De ahí pueden escoger el idioma. Y para no escuchar el audio original, elijan mute original y de ahí escucharán la interpretación. Thank you. We're thrilled to welcome you all to the second session of HIP's member-led webinar series with this panel of bold Latinx independent filmmakers and storytellers. Today's discussion will be led by Richard Perez, story strategist and filmmaker, a HIP member and director of the feature documentary Cesar's Last Fast, a film about the spiritual commitment of Cesar Y. Chavez. Thank you so much, Richard, for organizing this conversation around Latinx narrative equity and social change. There's so much power within the growing Latinx philanthropic community, and we're all very excited to hear from you and the panelists on how we can harness this power. Gracias.
First off, I want to acknowledge that I'm leading this webinar from Los Angeles, which is the traditional territory of the Tongva people. I think I speak for the other panelists. They're all very aware of the parts of the country that they're joining us from as once having been part of Native American lands. So I want to thank HIP, Hispanics in Philanthropy, for programming this webinar. And I want to welcome our panelists who we'll hear from soon. Jessica Sarawitz, who's the managing partner at 4SB Partners, LLC. She's also a philanthropist and the president of Miraflores Films. Christina Ibarra, who's a director of the upcoming feature documentary With This Light, also co-director of the feature documentary, The Infiltrators, and her colleague and sometimes collaborator in life and on the screen, Alex Rivera, who's the writer and co-director of Infiltrators, and also the writer and director of a sci-fi cult film, Sleep Dealers. So I want to establish the goals of this webinar. We really do, as Jen referenced, we want to harness the power of the growing Latinx philanthropic community to drive Latinx narrative change for social change. I think we're at a moment where we have more resources and knowledge than our communities have ever had. And I'd like to inspire you all to join in an effort to leverage this power so that we can start telling our stories on our terms in the visual medium that's film. Following this discussion, and we'll reference this throughout, the outcome is that we are forming a working group and brain trust around the Brownlighting idea. Filmmaker and Brownlighting coordinator Don Valadez will be joining us to talk about next steps and follow-ups after this conversation. Now, we only have an hour, and so we won't be able to cover everything that we'd like in this webinar, and this is a vast topic. There's a spectrum of social change that could happen with independent film. That's from very soft cultural influence to very concrete legislative and policies change. We won't be able to dive into deeply about that just now, but in the working group, we can explore that more. There are other areas where need more exploration, like the role of independent film, which is what we're going to focus on, and how that interfaces with the commercial and entertainment sector and news media and strategic communications. The focus of this conversation is really going to be about independent film. And then lastly, another area for more exploration is how to synchronize the work around this proposed initiative, Brownlighting, with the work that's being done along with in coordination with other organizations working in, say, specifically the entertainment sector, that being NALIP, or in the strategic communications and accountability sector, which is now part of the work of an emerging organization called the Latinx Accountability Project. What we're proposing here is really part of a synchronized other organizations across working in, say, sectors of the field that are carrying and communicating our story. I want to explain why I think we need a specific independent film funding initiative. Jen referenced a film that I made called Caesar's Last Fast, if we can see the slide of that real quick. Hedonimal. So 2007, or 2005 rather, I got the rights to make a documentary about Cesar Chavez. By the time I got the rights, I directed a feature documentary about the presidential election in Florida. I'd been the showrunner on 2 documentary series and the director of a third for a company called Brave New Films. So I figured by the time I got these rights, it'd be pretty easy to raise the money. Well, I was incorrect. I went to the commercial companies, Paramount, to see if they would fund it. They wouldn't. Participant, they wouldn't. So I had to go through the granting process and fundraising in the nonprofit sector. And that included PBS. That took a total of 7 years. It was hugely, hugely draining. And all during that time, there was the threat of losing the rights. Rightly so, the Chavez Foundation wanted a film made, and they said if I couldn't make one in a timely manner, I would lose the rights. Fortunately, I kept at it, kept convincing them. But the problem with me having to work 7 years to make a film about such an iconic figure in our culture, in our community's history, there was something wrong with that. But there were some good outcomes. Well, in the end, I actually had to borrow $100,000. The film got into Sundance. I didn't have money to finish it. I had to borrow $100,000. In the end, there were 2 good outcomes. One was that I had a good film. We can take the slide down. And the second was that it built a relationship with Sundance Institute. They eventually hired me. I worked there for 7 years as a senior staffer. Part of my project work was to look at projects that were being considered for funding. That gave me incredible insight about how Latinx filmmakers are viewed within this very sort of white curated power structure of funding in the nonprofit and independent sector. Hugely challenging to hear stories like, we don't need another immigration story. Are they the right filmmakers? How do we know they can finish the film? And I realized the gatekeepers for our stories were so far removed from our experience that we were inherently at a cultural advantage. And I had to do a lot of, I'll call it Latin explaining, a lot of advocacy. And these are well-meaning liberal people. It's not like they want to discriminate. And so I thought we're at a real funding disadvantage, right? And even when the diversity initiatives were starting to emerge, we're only going to occupy a portion of that because diversity is across a number of underserved communities. So I realized that there was no way we were ever going to keep pace or make up for that gap, if you will, because we're coming to this sort of storytelling scene kind of at the minus 50-yard line or say. So, and there's a problem. Meanwhile, there were some other funding models emerging in the nonprofit sector that I thought we can take inspiration from. So let's go through the next set of slides. So first off, one of the things I learned at Sundance very intensely, because I commissioned some research and was part of some research at Sundance, was that independent film, they act as social interventions. They influence cultures and societies, sometimes very subtly, sometimes very directly, like I said. So they have a very concrete social change and cultural influence use in a way that the commercial sector, they can, but you can't exactly take, some Sony Pictures studio and go change a law. There's, Sony Studios, they're not in that business. Second slide. And so that the creation of independent films, because they're cheaper, we don't have to ask for permission if we get funding from, studios. We don't have to go through their greenlighting process. Independent film, it's an accessible and viable alternative to tell our stories in the way that we want to tell them, right? So that we don't need to ask for permission. We can self-fund if we have the resources. And then the last slide. And then lastly, that, because independent film and this, we can fund them ourselves, It's a self-empowerment sort of form, but that could exist alongside all the work that other organizations that I mentioned are doing. Like I said, NALIP, there's the Latinx Accountability Project, a number of actors, and that we can work in a much more synchronized and intentional way along the trajectory of telling our story. So that's my case those are my cases, if you will, for supporting independent film. So with that, I want to talk about two examples of projects. One, recent projects on how it was funded, how the challenges it received, when it first tried to get funding, and then the doors that opened when it came into a new funding model that I'm hoping we can replicate. And then the second film is, a variation of this new funding model. So I'm going to start off by having Hedonimal roll the trailer to The Infiltrators, and Alex, you can take it from there and tell us about the film.
Inside the matrix of 200 detention centers, almost 40,000 immigrants are locked up.
According to ICE policy, your husband's not supposed to be in there at all.
So it's the national ICE in DC that can do something.
1,400 deportations every day, 1 minute.
I bet we're just thinking about immigration.
My dad was detained in front of me.
Well, tonight, I have one question. Hi. How can I get in?
You're gonna be transported to a detention facility.
We're all young illegals. Our mission, stop the deportations. Our strategy, get into the detention center and get people out.
There's a woman inside, it says detention center.
Video, you ready to get detained?
I called my mom and my dad, and I said, this is what I'm about to do. They were scared for their daughter.
Call this number with your case, they're waiting for your call.
Aumentar un cuchillo re filoso.
We can pass out a lot more phone numbers now.
Vamos a tratar de terminar 600 antes de la muerte.
Uno no sabe dónde va a parar todo lo que está haciendo.
I don't know what you're up to, but from now on, things are going to be very different.
Her husband was beating her, and she finally went to the cops to turn him in, and then they detained her.
They're deporting Benny. His flight is tonight.
I have somebody that's being deported in a couple hours. His life is in danger.
Not leaving.
We're not leaving.
Smile got released. Dreamer released. Dreamer released. Dreamer released.
Great. So I'd like to welcome Alex Rivera to tell us about the funding challenges he had making the film, he and Christina. But also I want to remind our guests to look in the chat box, because we'll be posting information about our follow-up convening if you're interested in being part of the working group, and other links during this webinar. So Alex, welcome to Brownlighting. Bypassing Hollywood's curatorial wall, if you will.
Right on. Thanks so much, Rick. It's great to be here. Thank you, HIP, for opening this space, and thank you everybody who's out there on the other side of this data stream connecting to this conversation. I think it's an absolutely important moment in time to have this conversation. So Rick, should I just kind of talk a little bit about the funding challenges sort of up to Catalyst, or all the way through finishing the film?
Yes, both. And the benefit of Catalyst and how that can inform a new initiative for Latinx philanthropy, Catalyst and Chicago Media Partners. So yes.
Sure, beautiful. And so, and I guess just as a quick thing, this film was made by Christina and myself in every way, as both producers, both directors, but just for today's formatted conversation, I was going to take this piece of the puzzle, but I just want to say everything I'll speak about was sort of moved forward by Christina and myself. But basically, it was back in 2012. We were making a film about a wave of activism led by dreamers when we came into this incredible story. And you got, I hope, a flavor of the story from the trailer that our distributor put out. And we knew we were on the tip of the spear of history. We were watching Latinx leadership, undocumented leadership, impact the national political dialogue. And what we were seeing with our own eyes and with our camera was not being reported broadly in the news. And the story that we came into was incredible. And we set about to tell it. And as Rick mentioned, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to talk about a lot of the artistic challenges, which were multiple, but really talk about just the material challenges. The first thing was getting to the ground. We were reacting to fast-moving events. And so the first bit of funding we received was from a group called Culture Strike, which is a funder and advocacy organization out of the Bay Area committed to social change, primarily around immigration. And they provided us with like $10,000 to take a trip to Florida, to be on the ground where this unusual activist campaign around this detention center was being led by undocumented youth. And so we were there and we filmed. And then we were able to come back and start to put the material together and put applications together. And it was, I've known Rick for many years, but I hadn't heard the story of all the people who did not fund his Cesar Chavez film, because I hate to report it's a lot of the same entities that also we struggled with. A lot of the funders that you would think, this is a film being made by myself. I had already won 2 Sundance Awards for my previous feature film at this point in my career. Christina had already delivered 3 successful feature-length documentaries. We're mid-career filmmakers, and inside the Latino field, I think some of the more high-profile indie filmmakers, and we couldn't get funding from Participant. We couldn't get funding from PBS. We did get funding from a cluster of grantors that had a sort of social mission or a political mission, like Unbound Philanthropy, which is committed to immigration, the Serdna Foundation, the Rauschenberg Foundation, which had artists as activist projects, some funding from Sundance and Tribeca.
And if I can add, that's like small change funding, right? These are like 10,000 grant, and that it's like chump change, we might say.
Yeah, we were able to basically cobble together about half of our budget with that strategy of these sort of small project-specific arts grants. But it left us with about half of the film to fund. And this is where the creative aspects enter into the funding aspects, is that this project, again, and I should mention that it was developed in partnership with several community-based organizations, one of them the National Day Labor Organizing Network, one of them the activists themselves, the National Immigrant Youth Alliance. With them, we decided to recreate the detention center. And so you see a bit of that in the trailer, that this is a film that mixes documentary elements to show the campaign outside, but inside detention, we had to build a set and fill it with actors. And that was incredibly expensive, and you can't piecemeal that. You can't get a bit here and a bit there to do that. You have to build the set once and film the movie. So we found ourselves with basically half a movie, the documentary half, and needing this next half, which was about $400,000. And from the grantors that I mentioned that we were lucky enough to engage with, that was an impossibility. And so we were so fortunate that we went through this program called Sundance Catalyst. And what, Sundance does many different activities, and they fund artists in many different ways. Catalyst is one of them. And what they do at Catalyst is they bring 10 filmmakers who have works in progress to this mountain in Utah, to the Sundance Mountain. And then they bring together about 60 high net worth individuals who've supported the Sundance Institute. So see, these are individuals who've made contributions to Sundance's annual budget or other programs, but who want to start to support artists directly. And so Sundance brings those 60 or so investors to the mountain and 10 films. And you spend days together showing your work in progress, talking and getting to know each other. And it's a really extraordinary program. I feel like a kind of guinea pig. I've been through all the programs, all the tests, and this one is extraordinary because, number one, there's 60 investors and 10 projects. So as a filmmaker where you constantly feel disempowered, applying to this, applying to that, and competing, constantly competing with your peers, this was a space of abundance. It felt like there's 10 projects and 60 funders. We're going to work something out here. We'll get over the finish line. And then it's social, where the funders and the filmmakers break bread together, have meals, talk, get to know each other. And then the Institute was kind of providing a helping hand, helping the filmmakers pitch their projects, helping the investors learn the basics of film finance. And with that 1 3-day experience on the mountain, we raised the remaining $400,000 for our film. We finished the film. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival about 8 months later. We won all the awards in our category: Audience Award, Jury Award. And I guess I'll leave it there just to say that's it. But just to echo what Rick said, in our case, and maybe those of you who know the history of immigration activism, you can put this on the timeline. From that first moment when we were on the ground filming, that was 2012. And the film premiered at Sundance in 2019. So once again, the exact same number that Rick said, of 7 years. 7 years. And this is not our first film. We're not learning how to do this. This is a condition of facing systematic resistance, misunderstanding, and undervaluing of our stories that makes it take 7 years for mid-career filmmakers or filmmakers who are telling the stories of cultural icons like Cesar Chavez take that long. And so there's a crisis here, and we're so excited to open this dialogue about building a better system.
And let me you may want to mute because I think I'm hearing echo. So while Alex and Christina got into the Catalyst program, and in full disclosure, I was part of that Catalyst selection team. There are like 5 films. I had to call in all the chips to get their film selected, because first of all, there's 5 films, and the conversation literally is like, what Latinx film we're going to take? There's room for one in a program like that. And so, well, ultimately that ended up being a game changer, and they applied 2 consecutive years. The first year they didn't get into Catalyst. The bottom line is that at scale, a program like Catalyst, while it's amazing, and it helped Alex and Christina finish their film about, immigration activism, it is serving such a fraction of our makers that we cannot rely on that curatorial process, which essentially is a white curatorial process, to decide who has access to a room full of funders. And that's kind of like the bottom line. What we're trying to promote is, how do we cultivate our own community of philanthropists where we get to decide, and we create those environments like Sundance. So on that note, I want to introduce, thank you so much, Alex. By the way, you may want to check the comments section. We're going to be posting some links, like how you can get in touch with Don Valadez, the Brownlighting Working Group Coordinator, for the follow-up. Also, we'll put up some links for I believe it's 4 organizations that currently exist that have models that Alex mentioned. Again, these are white-led organizations really serving a broad array of projects, of which occasionally we get to be selected. So with that, there's a project currently in the pipeline being directed by Christina Ibarra, who is Alex's co-director on The Infiltrators. And it really reflects a new sort of self-empowerment way that we can support our films through our philanthropic community. So I'm going to start off by having Hedonimal roll a clip of an upcoming film called, feature documentary called With This Light.
Una vez tenía un grupo de jóvenes rebeldísimos. Entonces se me ocurrió que íbamos a hacer una gran fogata. Y entonces llevé bastante papel y les dije, escriban todo lo que les molesta en estos papeles. Dije, muy bien, ahora ustedes pueden hablar de esto si quieren, no necesitan decir, pero sí necesitamos quemar esto para olvidar. Ya quemamos lo pasado, ya quemamos el porqué, las preguntas del porqué ya están quemadas. Ahora vamos a empezar a vivir una vida nueva. Una vida llena de luz. Este no es Motagua tampoco.
Ese es el portero.
Ah. Sí, Motagua, le doy la...
Ha sido todo bien marcado y en la última jornada
que ganen.
Marcelo Estigarribia a prepararse la indicación de Rodríguez, puede empatar y cambiaría la situación para Real de Minas. Al Chelo Estigarribia.
Gol. Tamaño golazo. Yo creo que para trabajar con Dios, de acuerdo a su voluntad y todo, uno no puede ser muy cuerdo, tiene que ser medio travieso, medio loco, porque seguirlo a Él no es fácil.
Ser medio travieso, medio loco. I think that's why filmmakers do the work that they do. So I want to welcome Christina Ibarra. She is the director of With This Light. Christina, can you tell us about the funding of this film, this process, and how it is different from your experience for all the other films? You have a long filmography, and how that can draw, we can draw inspiration from that model.
Yeah, hi. It's great to be here. Thank you, Rick, for organizing this incredibly urgent conversation. And thank you to Hispanics and Philanthropy for hosting this conversation. But yeah, this was an incredibly unique process for me. This is my fourth feature documentary, and it's the first time that I've worked with one sole funder for the project. All of my past films have taken 7 years to make, 5 to 7 years. This film will be completed despite the pandemic on the second year, after the second year. So that's something that's possible because of who the funder is. This film came to me because it was a Miraflores idea. It was a Miraflores proposal to create a feature-length film about this extraordinary woman who we just met, Sor Maria Rosa Legol. She's known as the Mother Teresa of Honduras. She has over 70 years of service. and has an incredible amount of work that she's done to help people who are suffering and to alleviate that suffering through various creative projects. What I was charged with doing with this film was to do something that would kind of go beyond the traditional biopic and do something that was culturally sensitive, but that would help translate the vision and the mission of SOR across the world. So, the ambition for the film is to reach a wide audience. And this process was just incredibly different because the way this project came to me was I received a phone call from Jessica's producer and projects manager as they were fielding interviews with directors. And I was able to talk about how I might make a film like this. And I was able to talk about my artistic approach. Once I was able to get their understanding, then I was able to set a direct meeting with Jessica. And so she was able to meet directors and choose who she thought would be able to elevate the film to a level that would reach many audiences. And I'm really grateful to be able to work with this incredible team, because it's a team that's really interested in centering the Latino voice, not just in the way that Latino stories are represented in front of the camera, in this case with Sor Maria Rosa, but also in how the process behind the camera. So Jessica's interested in seeing Latinos in decision-making positions, and it's part of her, she can speak for herself, but from what I have seen, it's part of her ethos, right? And the way that she works. It's something that's incredibly unique, and it's meant that there's this incredible cultural competency in our communication that creates shorthands that makes the project, that facilitates the project. It makes it happen quicker. I've just found that compared to our experience, Alex and I's experience on The Infiltrators, and comparing that experience, funding and producing this one film, I think that one of the things that it's teaching me, or one of the lessons that I'm walking away with, is that having the funding sources coming from people who understand the culture and the mission, it's imperative. It's urgent. It's something that facilitates that it's something that helps diversify the types of stories that we're seeing, so that stories are pushing the boundaries. They're sustaining a mission, but they're also entertaining. So all of these things are given equal weight, like how you tell the story, what you're seeing, and how your team is going to come together. So I think that is. Sorry, did I lose you? Oh, I can't hear you.
Yeah. So I like how you said that there was we didn't have to explain anything. We didn't have to justify anything. You didn't have to justify. So often when we're raising money in these sectors, either commercial sector, not, they're like, why is this story important? Why should we care? And I think that's part of the beauty of having a Latin, ex-philanthropist around this. So if you can, that's sort of what I'm getting at. Is that correct, Christina?
Yeah, there's this, when you're going to talk about your vision to many different grantors, there's always this level of doubt, like, can you really do what you say you're going to do? And I feel like that's not so much the conversation anymore. You can elevate the conversation, at least with the funder like Jessica, because there's this faith, or there's this proof that you've done this work. She can see the history of your work, and now the conversation is more about what what is the story? What are the nuances of the story? Like, what are we going to prioritize dramatically? I mean, it just becomes a conversation where you're not having to constantly prove that, you know, your approach is going to work.
Great. So maybe we should hear from our trend-setting, groundbreaking funder philanthropist herself. So we hear from Jessica Sarawitz. Great. Jessica, can you join us?
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Christina, and thank you, HIP, for inviting me today. I am so grateful for the invitation and so happy to be joining everyone here, and thank you for joining. So, you know, Rick, you asked me why fund this? And really as a philanthropist, and let me go back and say that I run a family office. I'm the managing partner of our family office, Forest Bay Partners. Within the family office, we have the Julian Grace Foundation, who supports, we are grant makers, over 100 organizations. And our family got involved in filmmaking through documentary film work. And one of the things that we realized was the power of influencing culture. And so we were presented with opportunities within the scope, film opportunities, documentary film opportunities, within the scope of our focus areas. A big one being human rights and immigration. So we did a film, a documentary film, Brightness of Noon, parts 1 and 2, about the sanctuary movement in the US, asylum and immigration issues. So, and that did really well. It was featured all across ABC in all the affiliate markets. And we were really proud of that. And it runs every so often. We've actually participated in a Maya Angelou film, which, you know, coincidentally, the documentary Maya Angelou and Still I Rise, coincidentally took 5 years to make, which was really kind of an epiphany for me, because I said, how can this film that has so much beloved, so much love from her audience, and how could it take 5 years? What's the problem here? There's a problem with the way in which the finances work. And so, and we have other films, I'm not going to mention all of them. I thought to myself, I want to make a film about a powerful spiritual leader that I admire, who has been in our life, our family's life, for over 40 years, because she's had 70 years of service in Honduras, and the impact that she has had, not only in Honduras, but in Central America, the US, and in Europe, is truly profound. She has, as Christina said, she's termed the Mother Teresa of Honduras because of her work with saving over 100,000 abused, abandoned, orphan children. And not only that, but she has she was a catalyst in really philanthropy. And this is why I admire her so much. She was a catalyst for the creation of over 86 public health clinics in not only Honduras, but in Central America. She was the first, her site was the first project site for an organization called Global Brigades, which is a university-wide system. There were over 80 universities in the US that participated in providing volunteers, and this is for public health, brigades that are sent to not only Honduras, but various sites within Central America. So she was the first site for that. She created a peasant or a peasant-led farmers cooperative bank, and she did that. She started a telethon, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And I was thinking to myself, this story needs to be told. We need to hear this story because it represents not only a story from a spiritual perspective, which right now, especially under the pandemic, we all need a little bit of lift, but it represents the Latino female perspective within the Catholic Church. And then also, what does it mean to be a social justice, in my eyes, she's a philanthropist because she has done such vital and great work across many different sectors. Even most recently, she created a commercial kitchen. This commercial kitchen, this is like at the age of 92 years old, is now, I just heard from the organization a few days ago, is providing 805 meals per day to a construction company who has they won the bid to create the U.S. Embassy. So over 805 meals a day, or over 800 meals a day. And they are self-sustaining. So they are profitable. She created, right around the same time in her 90s, a project for a grocery store. And they, within the country, within this organization, they were able to obtain the rights to be wholesalers. And now they're also self-sustaining. So, how does this Catholic Franciscan nun do all of this? This is an incredible story. And I knew that because I knew her so well, that I would have this sort of access that was needed to, get her powerful words on film, get her story on film, and hear in her own words, what led you to do all of this? What was the trajectory of your life? How did you start? And what were the challenges? What were the struggles? And why at the age of, at the time I was like 92 years old, why are you still doing this work? And how is this possible? So, this is why I felt that this film needed to be done, and needed to be done from a female perspective, from a Latino perspective. And I tried to make sure that the professionals that are working on this film represented this demographic. So that's why we have Christina as the director. We also have mostly all of the key roles are female-led. They're female professionals. And what's really interesting is even within Honduras, we hired some filmmakers down there. And one of the things that really struck me, which was fascinating, when the first time that we brought a female cinematographer down to Honduras, they were blown away. They were blown away. They were like, we have never seen this before. We thought that this was only men that did this role. And I said, no, that's not true. You're seeing it right now. And I thought to myself, my goodness, I didn't even understand how important it is. And so, that's basically in a nutshell the story. But I do want to say, as a philanthropist, I am well aware of, demographic changes that are occurring in the U.S. with the Latinx community, how we're becoming, we're expanding our population. And so, right now we're about between almost 18% of the population. By the year 2060, we should be around 29% of the population. Now, when I'm wearing my other hat, which is the family office hat as an investor, I'm thinking there's a market right there. And we need to make sure that, as Latinos, Hispanics in the US, that we have the proper infrastructure set up so that what you're doing, Rick, what you're talking about is creating this fund so that we can have our own stories told, that's important because the market is out there for us. And we need to have our own stories told. So, you know, if that's the only takeaway you get from this, it's that the market is there. It will eventually, you know, we will have more opportunities to commercialize our stories. I know it is very challenging right now with trying to get funds from this sort of granting process. But more and more, there will be people that will understand how important it is for you know, our own stories to be told.
Thanks for making that point, Jessica, because you work at a very important intersection of understanding business, market economies, also philanthropy, and something like storytelling. And yes, that eventually things will open up for us. But unless we're poised to have a generation of storytellers who can maximize those opportunities that we certainly hope will, we're going to be behind the game. So in previous generations, we got a lot of excuses like, oh, there aren't enough qualified storytellers in not only in storytelling, in many fields, there aren't a lot of qualified X. We're at a pivotal moment for our community and society as a whole, right? That we can self-empower and take control of our narrative, where we're proactive, or we can wait until we're reactive in a generation. And I think that's part of what I'm getting at. For generations, and rightfully so, people have knocked on doors and demanded equity, and that still has to happen, but we could also propose our own self-empowered solutions. So I'm really so encouraged by your work and how you can inspire other Latinx philanthropists to be part of a storytelling or a narrative equity movement. It's really, I continue to look forward to working with you. By the way, in sort of, I think I told you this, Jessica, in May 10th, I'll be starting a new position at a high-profile documentary nonprofit organization. I'm dotting the I's on the contract, so I can't say it. But in that capacity, I think our community will have some foundational work to be able to pilot something like this Brownlighting movement. So I think this is just the start of a conversation, and in a bit we'll be joined by Don Valadez, who will tell us some next steps. But I want to call in our other panelists real quick to sort of summarize the takeaways that from this experience and this conversation, and anything that particularly you would like to leave our audience with, some thoughts, some you know, calls to action, etc. Let's start with you, Alex.
Oh, hey, can you hear me, Rick?
Yes.
Great. Hey, well, thank you. It's great to hear from Christina and Jessica. It's a powerhouse. This panel is a powerhouse. So thank you. It's great to be in this company. Now, in terms of moving forward, I mean, I think in some ways this is a complicated field. Like, there's a lot of different types of films. Just in a nutshell, there's documentary and scripted. There's you know, and things in between. There's experimental film and traditional. There's films that are really geared for TV and films that head towards the theater. There's a realm of possibilities. And on the backside, on the budgeting side, and on the investing side, there's also a realm of possibilities. In the case of the infiltrators, you know, we received donations where people just wrote checks to a nonprofit that was our fiscal sponsor. We received stock donations from one investor who wanted to offer something that way. I think it was a tax advantage on their side, but it was...
Wasn't it Facebook stock? Didn't somebody give you...
It was Facebook stock. I think a well-timed sale for them.
How many Latinx filmmakers have gotten Facebook stock from...
Yeah. But we also received investment where they, those larger numbers, like it was, you know, in the 300,000 range, that somebody, you know, put that the Chicago Media Project, a group out of investors from Chicago, put that money in for equity. So they held on to a stake and ownership of the film. And, you know, if the film had done well, they would have commercially. Instead, sadly, the film was devastated, like so many things, by the pandemic. But if the film had made money, they would see a return, you know. And so my point is being that the art form is complex and hybrid. The financing models can be complex and hybrid. It's a realm of possibilities, but the thrust of all of it is urgent and simple, which is that we are a huge part of this country and we have nearly no infrastructure to tell our stories with authenticity and with integrity. And that's a simple thrust of it. And so if you're moved by that simple mission, you know, I'm so excited Rick is opening a space for us to have these kind of more complex conversations about the world of possibilities that ahead of us. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Alex. That's great to remember that there are so many different ways that you can be an investor and a funder. One of the things that I took away with our experience at Catalyst is that there was kind of education happening on both sides between, you know, the funders learning about how to invest and the filmmakers learning how to work with different kinds of investments. And so it was like a two-way street. And I am absolutely feeling the urgency to create alternative models of funding for Latino projects with Latino storytellers who are they're the ones who are telling the story, because we do need that alternative to the more traditional structure that can work alongside it, but only because if you look at the amount of time it takes for us to make our projects, it is because we are having to convince people over and over again. It's almost like our past doesn't matter, you know, but we've been here this whole time and we've been working, but yet other people move faster. Why? It's because of who's in charge and making the decisions on how the money's distributed. So I think it's such an important conversation, and I'm really happy to be a part of it.
Jessica, do you have some final thoughts?
You know, Christina really said it well. It's who's in charge of the money. And as you know, a community here, Hispanics in philanthropy, we all know that who's in charge of the money matters. And we need to create more infrastructure. And this, you know, what you're trying to do here, Rick, is going to be fabulous with creating the fund so that we can do our own stories. And, you know, we need to seed sometimes some of these efforts in order for us to get further along. You know, I'm be more than happy, I'm going to say, to you know, contribute to this because I feel so passionately about it. And, you know, for me personally, it's not only, you know, the creative side, but it's also the professionalism that goes along with filmmaking. So, you know, making sure that we've got cinematographers, we've got, you know, people who are colorists, people that are working, you know, behind the scenes. We have to seed more of the people doing, you know, internships in this work, you know, the process of the professional part of the filmmaking. So the creative and the professional. And then we have to be owners of our own studios, you know, because my vision is we need to be owners of our own studios. And I'm actually working on a project right now where I'm going to be creating a mini film campus. So, because I understand this, you know, but as philanthropists, there are multiple ways that we can help to seed, you know, our own people to be in professions. And I hope that everyone, you know, explores this, engages in this, because we need it now.
Wow, Jessica, I'm so really moved and inspired by your vision. I'm almost kind of teary because I've been grappling with this for so long, and also by your generosity, not in your past, not just your past work, but you're getting it, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we can work together, because it's a long time coming to find a person who understands the role of philanthropy and the complexities. Now, there in the chat box, there should be links to some of the different organizations that Alex has and Christina that have funded before, and so give you guys a sense of how they work and how we might take inspiration as we move forward and build a more empowered model for ourselves that works for us. You know, we don't have to follow other people's models. And in that spirit about building this, I want to bring in my friend and colleague, Dawn Valadez. Dawn is a filmmaker, but also she is the Brownlighting coordinator. She will be coordinating the convening of a working group and a brain trust around next steps in building a network and piloting this conversation. So for all of you out there, philanthropists or people or funders or even people interested in investing in film, or if you're 1, 2, or 3 degrees of separation from members of our community and allies who are interested in participating in piloting this effort, Dawn is going to be the person you'll reach out to. Her email is in the chat box. And Dawn, can you tell us what the next steps are, if you will? Dawn is, like I said, a dear friend, a filmmaker. She's a program director at BAVAC and also a development consultant. So,
great. Hi, buenas tardes, everyone, and thank you so much, Rick and HIP, for having us here. Yeah, I hope you're all as inspired as I am. This conversation is a long time coming, and we're really happy to be here. Like Rick said, I'm Dawn Valadez. My email is in the chat for you. We're going to be convening in May. We're very, very excited to do a brain trust, a planning session to really think about how to move this forward. We want you to also, so please send me an email. I'll be coordinating and organizing this meeting. Please share my email address with your colleagues and your network. So if there are people who couldn't make it today, we'd like to see them as well. And look for the email response from me, letting you know when our convening is. And we look forward to speaking with you and brainstorming with you. And obviously, Jessica is an inspiration to us, and my colleagues, Christina and Alex, just, always impress me and blow my mind. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to meeting up with all of you. And please send me an email and share my email address with your colleagues. And we'll see you in May.
Great. So we are out of time, and maybe you can call all of us up, including Jen Hedonimal. So we are all out of time. So unfortunately, we can't take questions, but I want to thank our panelists, and I want to thank Hispanics in Philanthropy and the people who joined this webinar, who took time out of their day, who recognize where we are. These are complicated times. Yesterday we had the verdict of George Floyd. The circumstances surrounding the death of Adam Toledo are troubling. Our brethren at the border, how they're being treated and how they've been treated in the last year. These are very important times that are calling for our collective, thoughtful response to how we communicate who we are as a people, as a community, as contributors of not just to this country, but to the world. And I really, really want to inspire everyone to be part of a movement to tell those stories. If we don't tell them, somebody else will, and they may not do a good job at it. And so we can do this, and we're going to do it. So please reach out, and we look forward to hearing from you. Okay, bye-bye, everyone. Thanks again, panelists.